Welcome back to Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the number one league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, part of the On3 Sports Network, joined by my longtime co-host and great friend, Brent Beaird, college football analyst for First Coast News down in Jacksonville, Florida. Brent, of course, also a voter for the most prestigious individual honor in collegiate athletics, the Heisman Trophy. And Brent, we've got some Final Four to talk about. We've got some basketball coaching movement in the Southeastern Conference to touch on as well. And of course, just a potpourri of
Huh.
football
Oh, yeah.
news and notes from around the SEC.
Yeah, great to be back with you, Travis. Hope everybody had a good Easter. Weather's turned for the better. We're grateful for that. But it is really, I've always said, undervalued time of year with basketball postseason. We've got spring games that are starting in the SEC and just a slew of them next week. So, simply, and if you're a sports fan, the Masters is around the corner. The women are in their Final Four too. So, Travis, if you can't find anything to watch this weekend, you're hurting.
If you're a college basketball fan and you appreciate the women's game like I have for some time
Mm-hmm.
now, it's just been a glorious stretch because
Yeah.
it's almost been a 4 or 5 day out of the week situation between the men's tournament and the women's tournament, and how much the women's tournament has delivered on the star power with Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, that South Carolina team coached by Dawn Staley. It's been great stuff. And then, to see the men's Final Four play out the way it has, Alabama, Brent, for the first time in program
Mm-hmm.
history on the men's side, advancing to a national semifinal in year 5 under Nate Oates. And boy, when you talk about the boxes this guy has already checked in a relatively short period of time, conference championships, conference tournament championships, number one overall seed, lottery picks, and now a Final Four. Nate Oates put himself right there at the top of that list of Alabama coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And even as so many Alabama coaches that did a great job, and C.M. Newton and Wimp Sanderson, Mark Gottfried got Alabama to rarefied air first in 2004 with an Elite Eight. And Trav, that team lost to UConn, ironically
In
enough.
Phoenix, and
Yes.
gets UConn in a national semifinal in the Phoenix area.
Yeah.
Yeah, full
Great point.
circle after 20 years, right?
It really is. There's no doubt about that. But look, the thing that so many different areas as far as being a recruiter, as far as having an up tempo offense and enough defense, oftentimes to be able to win during this NCAA tournament. The fascinating stories about that the staff that Alabama has and the path that from being a math teacher to now being one of the best coaches certainly anywhere. And listen, for this Alabama, for Greg Byrne, looking at a new arena, a smart move in a new contract and an extension. And Nate Oates in a short period of time, Trav's setting records in Alabama, making inroads in Alabama probably quicker than we've ever seen any coach do in the at the capstone.
No doubt about that. And when you think about how that roster turned over almost
Mm-hmm.
entirely, but boy, Mark Sears, you talk about improvement and growth as a player from his first year in the program as a transfer into Alabama a year ago to what we've seen this season. Amazing, because I watch other veteran guards for other brand programs in the tournament, and I haven't seen anything close to that kind of growth
No,
for some of those guys, the Jeremy
no.
Roaches of Duke and some of these other players. But Sears has really taken a colossal next step. That's been huge. But then You think about this team, and we talked about it before. Draw is everything, too,
Yeah,
in the
sure
NCAA
it is.
tournament. And not that Alabama's path has been entirely easy, because even a 12 seed like Grand Canyon gave them all that they wanted
Mhm.
in that round of 32, but still had to deal with the top seed in the West in North Carolina, took care of that, had to exercise some demons after a
Mhm.
previous loss to Clemson, did that. And you've got to get it from different guys. Yes, Mark Sears is your go-to player. There's no doubt about it. But Grant Nelson coming up huge against North Carolina in the round of 16. Jaron Stevenson, Nick Pringle coming up very big in that regional final win over Clemson. You go back to even Mo Diabate, a
Mhm.
reserve against
Mhm.
Grand Canyon. They don't survive the round of
That's
32 if
right.
Mo Diabate doesn't give them the 3 or 4 or 5 minutes late in that game that he provided. So yes, draw is important. But for a team that was 2-4 in its last 6 coming into the tournament, into postseason play, it just goes to show you never know until you get into the tournament what exactly is going to happen.
And then Wright, so hopefully will be able to play. He will certainly give them another shooter. And Jalen Griffin, who has had a really good year, going to be fascinating to see how Alabama is going to do playing defense. But to me, Travis, the importance of this week also has been Alabama's had a chance to tell its story in the past, in the present, and the future looks extremely bright. I mean, look, how many players, Trav, have contacted uh, either Nate Oates or his staff over the last few days to let them know that they're interested. So look, regardless of what happens Saturday night, this team, pardon the pun, is on a roll, and it's not stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, Rylan Griffin was very big as well in that stretch with his ability to knock down shots. And you had the McDonald's All American game on Tuesday night. I
Mhm.
think that was in Houston, and you had 2 Alabama signees
That's right.
playing in that game. So from a recruiting perspective, it continues to roll on. This should only help in that regard. You've already got some transfer portal addition coming in for Alabama. We've seen that from out on the West Coast. So Nate doesn't sleep much,
No,
and look, he turned over his entire coaching staff
that's
from
right.
last season. All 3 of those guys got Division 1 head coaching jobs, and now it looks like he's going to probably lose 2 more to
Mhm.
those same situations. He's already got one leaving for Texas San Antonio. I think another has an interview with Fresno State. So that won't be a difficult thing for him either to
No.
attract top assistants, because now it's becoming more and more known that, hey, go work for this guy.
Oh, yeah.
And within a year or two, you're going to be in a solid Division 1 head coaching position. But as far as it relates to UConn on Saturday night, no doubt about it. I mean, just a massive hill to climb, and the defending national champions absolutely wrecked the competition in the round of 16, really throughout the tournament. But the performance against Illinois in the regional final, where they go on a 30-0 run to blow out the proud Illini, unlike much I've seen in the NCAA tournament, past or present. But Alabama has some history with UConn, played the
Mhm.
Huskies a year ago, different teams, obviously. But I think there is one common denominator that you could take from that 15-point loss in Portland in November, late November of 2022, and apply it to this game, is that first and foremost, and Alabama's done a better job of this year, I think, take care of the basketball,
Yes.
because
Yes.
Alabama turned it over 21 times in that game last season. You're not going to have any chance. We can talk about
Mhm.
3-point shooting and the things that are going to happen in that regard for Alabama, being strong in the paint, getting into the paint, pitching out, creating open shots for others by these Alabama guards. But it starts with taking care of the basketball, because UConn, kind of like Tennessee, physical. They'll come out, get into
Yeah.
you, and challenge you on the defensive end.
And they've got length. That's going to be a problem with the bigs. But your point is spot on. And this Bama team, when they have protected the basketball, they have played extremely well. You and I've seen them this year, Travis, and made the comment that there have been times this year that they look like they could beat anybody in the nation. But when they're creating turnovers, and they can create turnovers 4-5 and 4-5 possessions, that they are a real problem. But again, when they play some defense, don't make turnovers, and this team has got to shoot well, and you really have wondered, I know I certainly have, is when does this team get everyone on the same page for one game to where they are hot and they're able to hit like 15 to 25 threes or something like that. People may scoff at that, but you and I both know this team's very capable of doing that. But again, an incredible challenge. This is a fun Final Four. Travis's NC State team that's looking for the Cinderella slipper too has been an amazing team to watch, and the role and how red hot that they are. And it gets us thinking about Jim Valvano back in the 80s and the run that they made. Also, in this Purdue team that is laser focused here, four teams in 4 different conferences that make up a very interesting Final Four.
Yeah, and the SEC was just a few minutes away from having half the field in the Final Four, because
sure
Tennessee, that was a heck of a game between Tennessee and Purdue in that Elite Eight matchup. Connect was about what you would expect them to be.
Yes.
For Tennessee. Needed a little more help from those around him, but Zach Edey at 7'4", just too much in the paint. And so Purdue and UConn reach there as chalk teams. Purdue and UConn do. And then again, as you said, a 4 seed in Alabama and an 8 type seed in NC State should be a lot of fun out in Glendale. Brent, let's get into some SEC football talk. Let's talk about some quarterback situations of note around the conference. We've mentioned in the past the Arkansas situation, KJ Jefferson moving on to UCF. That has opened things up in Fayetteville. Bobby Petrino comes in as the offensive coordinator to work under Sam Pittman. And it sounds as if Bobby's already seen enough.
Yeah.
He's already gone ahead and made a designation for the starting quarterback for the Arkansas Razorbacks moving forward. And given that Arkansas did go to the portal specifically for this guy, I guess it doesn't come as a huge surprise.
No, and this is a guy you mentioned a few weeks ago, and Taylor Green from Boise State, 44 touchdowns, 25 passing, 19 rushing, but he also threw 15 picks. So that's something they've got to work on with him. And Petrino is one of the guys who can do that. Jacoby Criswell, Malachi Singleton, they're also in the quarterback room, so we want to mention them. But Trevor, it was almost surreal watching Petrino this week actually do a press conference that
without a neck brace and a Sugar Bowl hat on.
Yeah, with any bruises on his face too. So look, there's no doubt that Pittman knew what he was doing when he brought Petrino in. Besides his personal issues, which are hopefully behind him, you and I both know from a X and O getting a quarterback ready, he can do it as well as anybody can.
He can, and I know some people look at this as an act of desperation by Sam Pittman. Whatever, I think it's good. I think it's smart.
Really?
If you're trying to go through and you're going through a quarterback transition, whatever you think of Bobby Petrino, and he's given us plenty of material, I guess you could say, to work with in the past. The guy can coach quarterbacks. He can get the most out of a quarterback, and he can coordinate an offense. So Taylor Green, it looks like, going to be the guy. I guess some of the good stuff I heard too coming out of spring practice at Arkansas is that maybe some receivers are stepping forward or continuing to grow. And I think of Tyrone Broden probably when I think about that. But I know they've got a couple of injuries there too, but that's another area where they've got to continue to step it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And my final Arkansas comment would be, I think their defense is going to be better. We talked about some of the players last year that gave Alabama all kinds of fits travel on that defensive line. So, and that's one thing Pittman said, we've got to improve our line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball.
South Carolina is another situation we've talked about here in the recent past, and it looks like that's going to take a little while to sort of figure out. I guess you got Lenore Sellers, you've
Yeah,
got Robbie Ashford coming in as a
right,
transfer.
right.
Luke Doty's been around for a couple of years. Doesn't sound like Shane Beamer is as close to anointing a starter as Sam Pittman and Bobby Petrino are.
And they've actually got Doty, Trav, at multiple positions. Now, Doty is a pretty good athlete, so I think they may use him a little bit, maybe in the backfield, more at wide receiver. And to your point a couple of weeks ago, it bears repeating with Sellers and Ashford. Travel, they're going to run a wishbone here.
Yeah.
My concern with them is you go from Spencer Rattler, who is a very undervalued quarterback. I thought in throwing the ball, I think they can certainly run, but we both know you got to have an effective passing game in this league, and that is going to be the challenge between now and the season opener.
And you lose Leggett, one of your top weapons all around on the offensive side of the ball, certainly as a wide receiver that's garnering a lot of interest by NFL clubs as he moves through this draft process as well. And as we speak about the wide receiver situations in the SEC, I know Florida has a lot to replace there in Ricky Pearsall, but I think one of the silver linings of an otherwise meh sort of year
Yeah.
for the Florida offense, other than Graham Mertz really shining
Yes.
at times, is that they did get some younger wide receivers involved and certainly a dynamic one or two in that mix.
Yeah. And their top three right now, and no surprise, is Eugene Wilson and Khalil Jackson. The guy that's really caught my eye is Tremere Dyke. And this is a guy that was with Graham Mertz at Wisconsin. And their chemistry is shown. They played well together at Wisconsin. That's going to be helpful coming back for, I think, Mertz at this point. And I'm curious Pop's takes on this, by the way. A lot of Gator fans sometimes need to be talked off the ledge, thinking DJ Lagway was going to be a star all of a sudden. Well, Travis, a lot of young quarterbacks are. And fortunately for him, he's in the spring, but his head's spinning at this point. And to me, that's why it's great to have a Graham Mertz situation. And then you can bring Lagway along as it goes. It reminds me of what's going on at Florida State with DJ
The
Uwe
other DJ.
Ungalale and Brock
Yeah.
Glenn. So, but getting back to Florida, Trav, I think that's a huge plus for them. I really like Mertz. I think Mertz may actually be one of the better quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, I'm officially on that Mertz bandwagon in 2024. If he can stay healthy, again, not saying he's going to be Joe Burrow, not saying this Florida offense is going to be LSU 2019, but I think he can certainly be a top 3 quarterback in the league. When I look at DJ Lagway, maybe it's because he's from Texas as well. I get a little bit of a Jalen Milroe vibe when Jalen made the move from high school to college. Maybe Lagway's a little further along as a passer than Jalen was going into his freshman year. Both prolific Texas high school quarterbacks, as we know. But there is going to be a learning curve, especially when you go into a Billy Napier offense that's probably more pro in concepts than what DJ even worked with at the high school level. So certainly something to keep an eye on there. What about the Georgia Bulldogs? Because I think it's a little undervalued what the Dogs have lost at the wide receiver position, what the Dogs must replace. And that extends to Brock Bowers too, but Lad McConkey. I mean, it's not just one guy. Who's stepping forward in Athens at that spot?
The name you hear is Arian Smith. Really struggled last year, had a lot of drops, but he's had a strong spring. Obviously, they need to see those drops disappear in the fall. But I think that's he's one of the guys that they're able to count on right now. And by the way, the guy who's throwing him the ball, to no surprise to you, has had a very solid spring in Carson Beck. And their G-Day game's coming up next week, and we'll certainly be previewing some of that too. But to your point, I think they've got a good tight end room. But again, give Kirby a lot of credit with the guys that they've lost as they continue to improve. And still, in a lot of people's minds, the tone setter for this conference this coming season.
It's an interesting league, man, because
It is
incestuous at the wide receiver position too, because you got guys moving from one program to another
right
in the Southeastern Conference, not just at wide receiver, but when you think about Alabama and Texas, for example, and you think about receivers like Nyblack and Bond, previously of Alabama, now at Texas coming into the league. What about LSU too? Because if you follow the draft process, and well, if you're like us, you follow the SEC first and foremost. You know, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., those kind of guys that LSU is losing. I know Lacey comes back on the outside. Sounds like the Tigers also feel like they may have struck some gold in the transfer portal in that regard. How's that shaping up in Baton Rouge?
I think it's going fine. The names that you hear, Josh Williams at running back has had a solid spring. Also, they like Jacoby Guillory at defensive tackle, Sage Ryan, a familiar name at safety, Greg Penn at linebacker. And Trav, notice these last three players are on defense. And that's where they've made the most improvement. That they've changed. Bringing Bo Davis over obviously is huge for them. Blake Baker coming from Missouri, I thought was a really good hire for them. And I give Brian Kelly a lot of credit. He's criticized, he's sometimes ridiculed, but he knows if that defense is not better, Trav, in this league, that he's only going so far, whether he's got, like he did last year, one of the better quarterbacks in the nation or not.
Yeah, and that wide receiver, Kyron Lacey, again, looks to be wide receiver one. Aaron Anderson, we talk about wide receivers moving within the league, previously of Alabama, entering his second season at LSU. We talked about the transfer portal with LSU at wide receiver. When you think about CJ Daniels and the production he had at Liberty previous to his move to Baton Rouge. So let's also get into some upcoming spring games. Brent got one on Saturday at Auburn. Should be very interesting because there are, speaking of new pieces on the outside that are getting rave reviews, that would be the Auburn offense, which they desperately needed that. Absolutely needed that to help that quarterback situation. And then Vandy's spring game on Monday. Is that correct? Now, I know there's still some ongoing logistical things
absolutely.
With the stadium and all that. I'm not sure how much that plays into it, but we'll start with Auburn and give us a couple of things that you're looking for coming out of Auburn's version of A-Day.
Trav, this A-Day game's almost incognito, is it not? I mean, this is one of the quietest spring games I've heard in a while, particularly at Auburn. Hugh Freeze has talked pretty much the entire offseason about Peyton Thorne and the need for improvement, and that he thinks he has seen that. But look, the big improvement that they've got is at wide receiver. They love Cam Coleman. They think he's going to be a really good playmaker. And again, as you and I've said for months, their receiver crew last year was abysmal. Frankly, all in all. So that is going to be extremely important for them. Micah Riley at tight end is a guy who they like. I think they think their defense is going to be better. Again, Freeze said at the beginning, and it's like what we heard a few minutes ago from Sam Pittman, one thing they've got to do is improve their line of scrimmage. Because their last two coaches, in Brian Arson and in Gus Malzahn, did very little to bring in linemen that they could use. So I think it's going to be a pretty fascinating spring game that's coming up for Auburn. And I think you've mentioned this guy too, Trav. We talked about Thorne, but there's a kid named Walker White
early enrollee
at quarterback who they really like.
Yeah, and it's going to be very fascinating at quarterback because I think Hugh and Auburn fans are expecting more Graham Mertz like
Yeah.
play from
Yes.
Peyton Thorne, and especially with the additions of Coleman and some other weapons around him. But what about defensively too for this Auburn team? Because I know it's going through some transition, maybe more so on the outside at the corner positions, but that's another area that I know Hugh is looking to solid up.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And one guy that they're really impressed with on defense is Keldrick Falk, who is on the D line. He has had a really impressive spring so far. So if they can continue to make improvement on that side of the ball, and if they can get a much better passing game, because I think you and I both like Jarquez Hunter
Oh yeah.
and what he is capable of doing. So, look, are they going to win the SEC? No, but the reality is Freeze wants to see improvement in these key areas we mentioned, and that's going to make a difference in what happens this year.
And we talked about Vanderbilt too. It feels like a total reset
Yeah, it
under
really
Clark Lee,
does.
and I wasn't really anticipating that at this point in his tenure, especially after a couple of seasons ago when they did finish impressively that 2022 season, and then everything seemed to go back to ground zero in 2023. It starts at quarterback, kind of trying to figure out who's going to exactly be the guy there. Had pretty good exodus of players, both at quarterback and elsewhere via the transfer portal after last season. Brent, it just feels like a new team to
Yeah.
me under Clark Lee. And you wonder how many of those is he going to get?
Well, and let me give you a 30,000-foot view of this and talk with some media near them that they are impressed with the $300 million commitment to the facilities. Obviously, they've got a new basketball coach. Their baseball program is going to be good. You were up there, obviously, recently and saw the improvements going on with the stadium. We were there last year for SEC Media Days. It's an incredibly complex, complicated city that when they get all this construction done, and a lot of it, as you know, is near Vanderbilt. So, Trav, I'm just wondering when they get these facilities done, what kind of improvement is that going to trickle down to their athletic department too?
Well, it's that's what they're investing in. And it's logistically, if you've never been to the West End and the Vanderbilt campus, it is landlocked. It
It
is
is.
tough. So
Yes.
if you're going to go through a project like a stadium, basically replacement in a lot of ways, you're not going to be able to go like a half mile away and do it somewhere else and
No.
stay in this
Right.
spot while you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's going to be problematic. I said it before though. I think if you're Vanderbilt people, it's an absolute positive situation that you're willing to deal with because for the first time in too long, Vanderbilt thinking big picture
Yeah.
in terms of
Absolutely.
football and
No
really
question.
athletics in general.
Yeah.
We talk about early enrollees, Brent. I know you're hearing some really positive things about a Tennessee defensive back in particular, Boo Carter
Yeah.
going in there and looking to make a strong contribution, not only maybe at that star position, that slot corner, safety type play anywhere, it sounds like back there, but also maybe in the return game as well.
Uh, the whoever is matched up with Boo Carter, the wide receivers have been asked the question, "Who's giving you the most trouble?" And most of them, to a man, have said Boo Carter. So that and look, I know Nico Lamaliva is going to get all the credit. Squirrel White, They've got some McCoy coming back, Brew McCoy. Look, we know they've got the offense with Josh Heupel. Trav, my thing, and you and I've talked about this for the last several months, they're never going to get where they want to be until they're better defensively. And I think that's kind of where they're going. Give them some credit with that too. And they've got, and along with Carter, they've had a pretty good spring from what we've heard from the media with their spring game that is also coming up. So excited to see what Tennessee's going to do. Nico is going to get all the publicity, but I still say they'll go only as far as their defense allows them.
I tend to agree. And as we've talked about, they don't need to be top 10 nationally in defense. But if they could be top 25-ish with that offense that you're anticipating from Josh Heupel, dialing things up, that could be enough. Let's get into some news and notes from around the Southeastern Conference. Brent, give us a couple of things, maybe outside the topics that we've already discussed that have stood out to you. There's always positivity. Understand that this time of year. Everybody's undefeated. Everybody's making improvement. Everybody's loving what they're seeing from their teams. But I know that's probably especially true for a couple of teams like in Oklahoma and a couple of others.
Yeah, I'm going to throw Texas, Trav, in there too. Sark has rebuilt this line of scrimmage. They've got 4 starters coming back. And I think they're excited about what their offensive line is giving them. Solid, obviously, too, at running back. C.J. Baker, Jaden Blue, Trey Wisner. These are names that a lot of our folks may not be real familiar with now, but believe us, they're going to, when Oklahoma and Texas get in there, Travis, they're going to make a lot of noise. Oklahoma center Troy Everett is going to miss the rest of the spring, got a knee injury. And you mentioned Jackson Arnold a few times. He continues to get better. He's not a finished product yet, but they do like the running backs. Gavin Sawchuk and Caleb Hicks are a couple of guys that we'll be talking about over the next few weeks. And what about Lane Kiffin, Trav, bringing in Joe Judge? Boy, if you want some experience in the NFL, you just got it with that. And also Ulysses Bentley. He was the primary kick returner, maybe the primary back, or certainly one of them. And they may take some of those responsibilities off of him at that point too. So just to hit on a few things around the league, Travis and I will be talking a whole lot more coming up about spring football, Bama, Georgia, among some of the games. Alabama's games on ESPN. The rest of them are on Plus. So, Trav, just a few things around the league. But before we go, we got to have a Pumps report. And, we're right around the corner, Trav, from the Masters. I'm sure you picked up on some trends before Masters Week gets here in a few days.
Yeah, Pops was over for Easter, conducted himself well. He just had that second cataract fix. So he's going to, as we talked about on the previous show, he's going to be able to see a lot better, which is a good thing, but it could also, I don't know if it's always going to be a good thing. But yeah, we got the Masters coming up. I think it's going to be Scheffler or one of the Live guys right now, other than Scotty on the PGA Tour. There's not a lot of these guys that are impressing me. We saw Justin Thomas recently part ways with Jim Bones McKay, his caddy, which tells you JT's not in a good place. Rory hasn't really been on form. So I think it's either Scheffler or Live guy. And you know what else? Missouri's already completed that spring game, but we should have probably touched on this with the quarterback situations earlier. But Matt Zollers, Zollers from Pennsylvania, committing to the Missouri Tigers. That's a big pickup for Eli.
And Trev, everybody thought he was going to Georgia.
Yeah. Well, he would been on this sort of junket where he had been to Alabama, he had been to Georgia, and you're thinking, man, it's going to maybe be the Georgia Bulldogs. But it seemed like as it went on, Missouri kept picking up steam, maybe some NIL in play. Hey,
Yes,
it's part of
yes.
it. But doesn't hurt either when you're Missouri and you win 10 games or whatever, 11 games, and you beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. That's got to help you too.
And travel. I'll mention this real quick, but one of the teams outside the SEC that's got my attention a lot this week would be the Southern Cal Trojans and the job they've done in recruiting. I know you got some real insight into that, but man, oh man, I don't think it's my imagination. They have really beefed up their recruiting and gotten some commits, obviously big time, and a lot of other teams looking at them. A lot of other guys looking at them too.
Yeah, they have. Lincoln Riley replaced really the entire defensive side of the ball. And he didn't just do it with probably an upgrade in coaching, also from a recruiting perspective. Eric
Absolutely.
Henderson coming in as a new DL coach, dynamic on that trail. And you've seen guys like Justice Terry, a 5-star from Georgia, go ahead and commit to Henderson and USC. Now you got to keep them. You got to
Yeah,
keep those guys.
sure
Still a
do.
ways to go until
Yeah.
December. A lot of NIL
Yeah.
out there, boy. A
Yes.
lot of NIL out there. So you gotta withstand that as well. But yeah, we'll see what happens on that front moving forward as well. Justice Terry, by the way, going to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend after he was in Athens here recently. So it's never over
No,
until
no.
it is over. And these days, even when it's over, it's not
Yeah,
over
yeah.
because of the transfer portal. Uh, the freedom of movement these days, it just come and go as you please. Hey,
Yeah.
Brent,
Yes.
go ahead.
Real quick, and we'll mention this again next week. Transfer portal opens again around the 15th and 16th. But this is important for our listeners. You can do this in the winter, but you can't do it in the spring. You can't transfer from one SEC school to the next. And I'm really wondering, Trav, do they look upon that and change that rule coming up in the
Now, does
next
that
year or
apply to
so?
grad transfers too?
Yeah, I think grad transfers have the freedom to do
They
whatever
can
they
go
want to
just about
do.
anywhere, anytime,
Yes,
I believe. But
yes,
yeah,
because they've
for
earned that. Yes,
undergrads, yeah, that's true. So we'll see how that plays out within the league. Brent, always enjoy it, man. Great stuff for us. We appreciate it. Look forward to doing it again real soon.
me too. Can't wait, bud. Take care.
For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you for joining us right here on Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the number one league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. And until next time, so long, everybody.